Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to conduct a postmortem, an investigation really, into one of the most famous disasters in history. We're going to look past the movie, past the legend, and really dig into the chain of failures that sent the so-called unsinkable Titanic to the bottom of the ocean. All right, let's get into it.
And it all really starts right here, with this quote. But you know, it wasn't just a line someone said, it was a whole mindset. An absolute, unwavering confidence, you could even call it arrogance, that surrounded this incredible piece of technology. This belief that they had conquered nature, well, it's the very first domino to fall.
Because you have to remember, before the Titanic was a tragedy, it was an absolute triumph. This wasn't just a ship. For all intents and purposes, it was a floating palace. I mean, it was the biggest, most luxurious moving object ever built by man at the time, a true symbol of what the industrial age could achieve.
And on this floating palace, you had two completely different worlds existing side by side. You had first class, with its grand staircases, heated swimming pools, and passengers who were the titans of industry, the wealthiest people on the planet. And then you had third class, full of immigrants who had scraped together everything they had for a simple cabin and a shot at a new life in America. It's this human element, this incredible mix of dreams and ambitions that makes the story so powerful.
But this floating city, carrying all those hopes and all that ambition, was sailing right into a well-known field of danger. So let's take a look at the timeline and see exactly how this incredible journey turned into a collision course with destiny. Okay, so look at this. The warnings were not subtle. They were clear and they were constant. On April 14th, the day of the collision, seven different ice warnings came into the ship's radio room. But what happened? Nothing. The ship just kept plowing ahead at almost 22 knots. That's incredibly fast for a moonless night in an area known to be full of ice. Then, at 11:39 p.m., the lookout, Frederick Fleet, saw it. But it was way too late. A single minute later, the Titanic struck the iceberg, and its fate was sealed.
Now, the iceberg gets all the attention, right? But it was just the trigger. It wasn't the real cause. The real story here is a cascade of failures. It's a perfect storm of design flaws, outdated regulations, and just plain bad decisions that all came together at the worst possible moment. Let's break down what really went wrong.
If we're looking at this like a safety investigator, the whole disaster really boils down to four main categories. First, this obsession with speed. Second, some really critical flaws in the unsinkable design. Third, a totally inadequate amount of safety equipment. And finally, a series of human errors and communication breakdowns that were just catastrophic. Let's tackle them one by one. So the first question is, why were they going so fast? It seems insane. Well, a very popular and well-supported theory is that it came down to business. The chairman of the entire cruise line was on board the ship, and he was allegedly pushing the captain to make a splash, to arrive in New York ahead of schedule. They wanted a new speed record. This pressure for a good headline, for a publicity stunt, put speed ahead of safety.
Okay, now for the design. The Titanic's whole unsinkable claim hinged on this amazing new technology, its watertight compartments. The hull was divided into 16 separate sections, and the math said the ship could stay afloat even if four of these compartments were totally flooded. But here's the fatal flaw. To save money and space, the walls between these compartments didn't go all the way up to the top deck. Think of it like an ice cube tray.
The iceberg didn't just punch one hole in the ship. It scraped along the side, slitting open not 4, but 6 of those watertight compartments. And because those walls were open at the top like an ice cube tray, water filled up the first few compartments and then just spilled right over the top into the next one, and then the next one, and the next. That brilliant safety feature was overwhelmed. The unsinkable ship was, in fact, sinking.
And this right here, this is maybe the single most damning failure of all. There were more than 2,200 souls on board the Titanic. The lifeboats had room for just under 1,200. Barely half. Now you're probably thinking, how's that even possible? Well, believe it or not, it was perfectly legal. The safety regulations at the time were hopelessly out of date. They were based on the ship's weight, not the number of people it carried. The law just hadn't caught up to these new giant ocean liners.
And on top of these huge systemic flaws, you just had a pattern of simple, stunning negligence. A lifeboat drill, a practice run, was scheduled for the very day they hit the iceberg. The captain canceled it. There are even reports that the lookout didn't have binoculars because they were locked in a cabinet and nobody could find the key. I mean, each little mistake just kept piling on top of the last.
You know, what makes this whole thing even more tragic is the story of the SS California. This was another ship, only about 20 miles away, so close they could see the Titanic's lights. They'd even radioed the Titanic earlier to warn them about the ice, before stopping for the night and turning their radio off. The Californian's crew saw the distress rockets being fired from the Titanic, but their captain thought they were just company fireworks. By the time they finally turned their radio back on in the morning, it was all over. Help was literally in sight, but it never came. So let's go back to the ship. The unsinkable design is failing. The closest rescue ship is completely oblivious. Those last 2 hours and 40 minutes were just this slow, horrifying descent into absolute chaos, as this legend, this symbol of human achievement, slipped beneath the waves.
And this chart reveals something devastating about that chaos. We know there weren't enough lifeboats, but would you believe they didn't even fill the ones they had? The very first lifeboat was launched with only 28 people on it. It had room for 65. Because that safety drill was canceled, the crew was disorganized. But the bigger problem was that same hubris from the beginning. People just didn't believe it. They couldn't accept that the great Titanic was actually sinking, so they hesitated to get into the little lifeboats. A fatal hesitation.
And in the end, this was the price of that long chain of failures. Over 1,500 people. 1,500 men, women, and children were left on that sinking ship or in the freezing North Atlantic water. We're talking water temperatures of -2 degrees Celsius. It was a staggering loss of life, and the hardest part to swallow is that so much of it was preventable.
You can't have a disaster on this scale and not have it change the world. The sinking of the Titanic was a brutal, painful lesson, but it became this massive wake-up call that completely rewrote the rulebook for safety at sea. And you can see that legacy crystal clear right here. After the Titanic, the world came together to create the first international safety treaty for ships. It's called SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea. And because of the Titanic, it's now the law that every ship must have lifeboat space for every single person on board. Radios have to be manned 24/7. And we even created the International Ice Patrol, which still to this day monitors the North Atlantic for icebergs. The rules we live by today were written in the wake of this tragedy. The ship itself sat lost on the ocean floor for over 70 years before it was finally discovered in 1985, 2.5 miles down. But its story isn't over. A new kind of bacteria is slowly eating away at the iron hull, and scientists think that by the year 2030, there might be nothing left at all. The great ship will have just dissolved back into the ocean.
So when you strip it all away, the lesson of the Titanic is a powerful, timeless warning against human hubris. It taught us that our amazing technology is only as good as the rules we write for it and the common sense of the people who operate it. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? What are the unsinkable systems we put all our faith in today? And have we truly learned the lessons from that freezing night in 1912?